What's up, everybody? It's your boy Dre here. And if you're watching this video, I hope that you are doing well despite the circumstances that we find ourselves in as we deal with, or continue to deal with, shall I say, this pandemic that we call COVID-19, that I call Big Rona. And as we also deal with the pandemic of racism. But before we get into what we're going to get into with this video, just want to give you a quick reminder. Please feel free, if you feel led to do so, to follow me on social media. You can follow me on Facebook. That's at Aundre D. Washington. You can follow me on Instagram. Same thing, Aundre D. Washington. And please do me a favor, subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right, let's get it. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe it was either October 31st or November 1st, 2019, so last year. I was at work, sitting at my desk. My phone goes off. It's a text message from my beautiful wife. And she sent me an image. And the image was a sign at a local Starbucks in the city of Federal Way, Washington. And that sign said, "Whites only." Yeah, that's right. For whatever stupid reason, somebody decided to spray paint those words on this sign at a local Starbucks. The words, "Whites only." Now, when I looked at that image, my first response, if I'm being honest, was just pure anger. Why would somebody do that? And as an African-American man, when I see those words, it tells me one thing, that I cannot walk in that establishment. And if I do, something bad is going to happen. What if my family decided to go to that Starbucks that day, my wife and my two boys, and I saw those words, "Whites only"? You're telling me that I'm not welcome because of the color of my skin. I gotta say, I was appalled. I was like, man, like, here we are at that time in the year of 2019, and yet this incident happens. And I wasn't even alive during the Jim Crow era, but I felt like I was in the Jim Crow segregation era. Oh yeah, I've read about the stories, and I know a little bit about the history of the signs that establishments would put up when they said for colored people and for white people, and black people had to use this dirty sink and white people got to use the clean sink. And my grandmother has even told me stories about walking in the back of restaurants because she wasn't allowed to walk through the front of the restaurant because of the color of her skin. Man, like, are we still living in a Jim Crow era? It may not be called Jim Crow, and I understand that in 1965, the Civil Rights Act was signed to eliminate those Jim Crow laws, but I gotta be honest, when I see stuff like that and I see the racism that is so pervasive in our society today, I gotta ask myself the question, while it may not be called Jim Crow, is it called something else? Can we just label it as systemic racism? My bad, folks. I went on a little tangent there. As I like to say, I'm real passionate about this issue, so let me get back on track. This image that my wife sent me was attached to an article. So I began to read the article, and come to find out, there was a citizen in the city of Federal Way who pulled over at this Starbucks and addressed the fact that they had "whites only" spray painted on their sign. Luckily, this article included the person's name, and that person, who is now my good friend, her name is Shar Bennett. I don't want to get into all the details right now, but I was so inspired by that article. I was so inspired by the fact that Shar pulled over and she addressed the fact that the Starbucks sign had a racial slur on it. I was even more inspired because Shar is a white woman. Hello, somebody. Long story short, I reached out to Shar. We've stayed in touch since then. I consider her a good friend of mine. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to my good friend, Shar Bennett, by way of a conversation that her and I had by way or via a Zoom call. This is not the first conversation that we have had. We have talked several times since this incident. She was a part of a conference that I led at my church, a conference to address social justice and racial reconciliation. She came and she spoke and she shared her perspective and her side of this story as she addressed this whites only thing that popped up on this Starbucks sign. So yeah, I really want you to listen. I really want you to learn if you're willing to, especially my white brothers and sisters who may be watching this. I want you to hear this lady's perspective, because as a black man, she has inspired me so much, and I was just so proud of her, and I really felt like that she spoke up for me. She spoke up for my family, that she spoke up for my community. Not only did she just speak up and say something, not only was she empathetic, but she walked it how she talked it. You feel what I'm saying? There was action to follow up her words. It wasn't just about performing. It was actually about progress. Okay? Check out this conversation. Shar, we've talked quite a bit. We've talked a lot about particularly this issue of racism, and you have been, for me personally, a very safe space, and I know that I am a safe space for you as well. I want people to really get a grasp on your perspective, because I think your perspective is unique, because while you have empathy and while your heart breaks, just like my heart breaks when we see racism, you don't just live in the space of empathy. Like, your empathy turns into action. And just like we were saying a couple of minutes ago, I was sharing with you my concern. My concern is that, George Floyd happened, Breonna Taylor happened, Ahmaud Arbery happened, just like a lot of other incidents that happened, from Trayvon Martin to Michael Brown to Eric Garner up until today. And a lot of incidents that we don't even know about, that don't even make the media, right? That happens, and my concern, and if I'm being completely honest, my skepticism is while people are protesting and people are fired up, and no offense, but particularly white people, while I'm thankful for the empathy and I'm thankful for everybody speaking up, I just don't want this thing to be swept under the rug like everything else. And we go back to our jobs, and we go back to our churches, and we go back to our communities, or whatever, and we stop having the conversation, and we don't build relationships with one another. And we stay divided, and then somebody else gets killed or murdered, or we see this huge act of racism on the news again, and then we wake up all over again, and then we go back to sleep. You know what I mean? And then I don't want it to be where we only address these major and macro incidents like police brutality, when, as you and I know from personal experience, we have microaggressions. We have subtle racial oppression that happens, I hate to say it, but probably every day, just like the whole Starbucks thing, the whites only sign. So granted, that whites only sign that you address isn't going to shake up the whole nation, but dog it didn't even shake up Federal Way. And I'm sure thousands of people drove down that street and they saw it. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like this big thing on the media. And I told you this, I'm just going to be honest, I really pissed off about the fact that people were trying to justify that by saying, well, some kids did that. It don't matter who did it. Because what that says is people who look like me can't go in that Starbucks. You know, at least that's what it meant back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just talk to me about, like I said, the empathy, the action, and then the need to address these racial microaggressions that we experience every day. And you and I just said, really, those things lead up to things like George Floyd. You know what I mean? Like, if we can start addressing and attacking these minor things now, well, maybe the next Black guy won't experience this grand expression of racism. So just kind of talk to me a little bit about the need for not only empathy but action as well.
Okay. I think I just want to kind of rewind a little bit and go back to that day for me.
Yeah.
Because it helps me just to kind of connect with what caused that reaction out of me and why I took action that day. I know that Starbucks felt like they addressed it quickly.
Yeah.
Because they commented on my post and they said all the right things. And but what I didn't, their apology fell short with me, because it was they were calling it a vandalism or graffiti. And that day, when like I told you, that day I was dropping my daughter off. I was dealing with my own problem. I was dealing with whatever I was dealing with that morning. My daughter and I were dealing with whatever we were dealing with, and I was heading from the doctor to work. And it was a busy morning. Traffic was horrible. I remember traffic was a bear that day. It was probably around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And so, I was driving by and I saw that sign, and I just remember it like took the wind out of me. It was, I was shocked. I was shocked by it. And because it looked like any other kind of signage. It was obviously graffiti, but, it did what it was supposed to do, which was calling attention to something. And I saw it, and I just remember feeling like it took the wind out of me. I remember just pulling into the left-hand lane, flipping a U-ey, pulling into the parking lot, parking, getting out. Immediately, I'd started recording a live of it. And I left my car running to like park and like go record this. And, I remember passing a Black woman that was walking by. There were people on the street. There was cars in the driveway. And I just remember feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone.
Wow.
Like I literally felt like it was just this feeling like, what kind of world is this, that people are going about their lives as if this was normal?
Yeah.
I remember just feeling like all these emotions, just outraged and shock and fear and hurt and all these things. And I walked up to the counter, and it was Halloween, and so the employees were dressed up in costume, and it was just this it was shocking. And I felt like, what in the hell is going on in this world right now? And I told them that they needed to get out there and take care of their sign. Yeah. And they were dealing with coffee orders and whatnot. And I'm like, whoa, in my opinion, in that moment, like, and I said this to you before, like, I felt like there was nothing that was more important in that world, in that moment, I'm sorry, than what I would have liked to have seen was stop everything. You get your people off of the window, whatever, like handle what you need to handle, but you haven't, deal with this, because it's those subtleties that you were talking about that are so toxic. The slow to respond, to me, was toxic. It was a toxic way to respond to that. And I remember it got a lot of attention. And if you read some of the comments in that thread, people were blaming me, saying I probably did it for attention. Why didn't I get out there and clean this? And believe you me, had I had the tools or whatever, I should have just gone and stood in front of it. I wish I had done that,
Yeah.
I feel like I could have done more in that sense. But I definitely, and I still feel that way. And when it takes me back to that moment, just that replaying that moment where I'm walking up, and I in my mind, I thought they must not know.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that moment really was so hurtful for me, because they were aware of it. They thought that they'd already cleaned the sign or whatever their reasoning. I don't know. And I'm like, wait, what? So the call to action for me was basically like, and I've told you this, that my commitment to you, and to anyone that knows me, is that I will rise to the occasion and in whatever means that I can.
Yeah.
And draw attention to this, because what hurt me that day is thinking about just the people seeing that and thinking that whatever they're thinking, like, words matter. Mm-hmm. I was heartbroken that day, and I still can go back to that moment, and it takes me right back to it, because I know how toxic this stuff is. And like you were saying, like, these subtleties that are accepted within the, corporate or whatever, like across, there are no borders here. When they happen, they're tolerated, it's accepted. And my husband, he works for T-Mobile. And I just wanted to say that, the way that they handled this, I was really, I was inspired by that. They called a meeting within their company right away. Like, as soon as this stuff happened, they called a meeting, and they were giving employees a platform to share firsthand experiences of racism.
Wow. And
they were talking about, mothers, fathers sharing stories about these talks that they have to have with their kids.
Wow.
And my husband, it brought him into such an emotional place. He needed to hear those conversations. And I think that messaging doesn't often reach the people that it needs to reach. Yeah. To me, the fact that you wouldn't know that Black mothers and fathers are having these conversations with their kids, that's the epitome of white privilege to me. The fact that you wouldn't even be on your radar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for that, I'm grateful that these things are happening. And I may have gone off track here.
No, you're fine,
Aundre.
No, I appreciate it. And that is the perspective that I want people to hear, because it's so much deeper than just empathy. And I'm not negating the support that I am seeing from the white community. I affirm that. I celebrate that. And I want people to keep talking and keep speaking up. But you just said it, like, look what T-Mobile did. They saw what happened. There was a sense of urgency. They called a meeting, and their action step was, hey, let's have a conversation and let's share stories. Because there are power in stories. There's power in stories, and stories can help change your perspective. And I'm sure a lot of people in that room, either they were heartbroken and their whole perception probably changed, or some people probably got defensive or mad or whatever. But it is what it is. You can't necessarily change a person's mind. But they did something. They didn't just go on their website and change their banner to say Black Lives Matter.
Right. Or publish a statement that was written by, whoever.
And it probably wasn't the most noticeable, or probably wasn't the most robust initiative, but there was action
and there was a sense of urgency, and it was logical, and it was practical. You know what I mean? And I think that was helpful. And that's why I just celebrate and highlight what you did. It was logical, it was practical. You know what I mean? And how you sent the message to Starbucks, like, hey, this is not cool. You know what I mean? And honestly, you probably at that time weren't doing a lot of posting on your own about racism, whatever. You probably, I'm sure, very cognizant of it, but you weren't worried about just trying to do this public service announcement type of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. That's a good point.
You got to that point, but there was some follow up, and that's what I am praying for. I am praying, and not just me, I'm sure a lot of Black people are hoping to see some follow-up. And the truth of the matter is, my friend, that follow-up needs to come from the white community. You know what I mean? It needs to come from those who have the privilege and who have the power, you know what I mean, to continue to address these issues alongside of us, and then empower us, you know what I mean, or give us a safe space like you did with me. You have given me a safe space as a white woman to process my honest feelings. You know what I mean? That giving us that safe space, you know what I mean, is empowering, because then we know that I know as a Black man, like, she's on my side.
Yeah, I got your back.
She's on my back. You know what I mean? Like, if something did happen to me, God forbid, and that was racially charged, I know a lot of my white friends that I trust, and you're in that group, they're going to be marching and protesting and saying, no justice, no peace. We want justice for Aundre. You know what I mean? And I truly believe that an individual like you with your personality type of stuff, you're going to try to push for results. Okay, we're going to march, we're going to protest for Aundre. Well, hey, what are we going to do for his wife and his kids? You know what I mean? Like, let's figure out some actual steps that will lead to progress, that will lead to change. You know, I know you're not going to have a problem with, you know, if one of your white friends says something racist, and I know you'll call it out and address it. Like, that's an action step in my mind, and it goes beyond just being heartbroken and empathetic. You know what I mean?
Let me just speak to that too, because one thing I've been really challenged with lately is I mentioned this before, like, I feel like the tension, and people are feeling stressed out. They're feeling that we're all feeling this. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that just are waiting for this to go away. They just want things to, you know, can we just be done with this? And I'm sure there are people that just, you know, they just want this to hurry up and go away so that they can go back to enjoying, I don't want to say their white privilege, but before I go further about that, I don't take the words white privilege to mean anything other than it's acknowledging the fact that, how do I even want to say this? I don't take it as a personal attack against me. When I say that about like what I just said about my husband being on a call with his work and not knowing about, and I hope he takes this the right way about what I was saying. But I feel like we have to go through that. We have to see it for what it is so that we can get past it. So we can get to start getting the work done that needs to be done. So when people talk about white privilege, I think the people that are really hurt by it haven't had to look at that side of themselves before. And I feel like what we're doing right now is we're asking people to really look at, you know, themselves closely and to take a look and to see it for what it is so that we can grow. And people are being asked to reflect and take a look at the way that they've seen the world. It's like a shift in the kaleidoscope. They're seeing things differently now. They're seeing themselves differently, and they're going to have to, so that we can get past this. And so what I was going to say is that, you know, I see a lot of this on social media, and I feel the stress and I feel the pain, and I see people talking, and I see people just you know, especially some of my white friends that are just, you know, wanting it to go back to the way it was, you know, where things are, I don't know, easier for them on social media.
We're not talking about the issue that.
Oops, I lost you.
Yeah, so they wanted to go back to normal, whatever that is.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Ah. You hear me?
I hear you.
You can still hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know why it got quiet. Okay, sorry. What I was going to say is that what has been a challenge for me lately is not unfriending or not because my instinct is, you know, I'm seeing some of this stuff and it's hurtful, and I'm seeing a different side of people that I didn't have to see before. So I'm getting exposed to different sides of their personality that are, it's not their fault. You know, they've been able to survive in this bubble for so long, and now they're being asked to look at things differently. My gut instinct is to unfriend, unfollow, whatever, you know, call them on it, cause or whatever. But instead, what I'm trying to do is I'm challenging myself to continue to talk about change and to talk about, share my perspective on some of the things that are happening in hopes that it reaches somebody. Yeah, that's the hard part for me right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I think what you were getting at is when you were making the comment, like they wanted to go back to normal, whatever that is, or because I think it is like it is challenging their worldview. And,
yes.
and in this topic, this conversation about race is so convicting. It's like a two-edged sword. I mean, it can cut down to your soul, and it is rubbing people the wrong way because they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, and it has to
deal with it. And even if and they probably never did anything wrong themselves. They probably have never perpetuated racism, but it still causes them to deal with the issue. You know what I mean? And you said it, like we have to face the fear if we're going to overcome it. Mm-hmm. We have to, point blank period. So yeah, you just, like I said, your perspective, I think it's just so helpful. And to hear you even talk about white privilege and your perspective on that, because I've encountered a few people recently where that term bothers them.
Sure.
And it is not meant to be offensive. It is what it is. And I told someone who's white, who had an issue with the term, I said, well, it's not even your fault. And I don't knock you for that, but you have to acknowledge it. And I acknowledge the fact that even as a Black man, there are certain privileges, you know what I mean, that I have. We all have them. It's just a matter of what you do with them. You see what I'm saying? If you're
sure.
a good steward of them, or if you're going to abuse the privilege. But yeah, the reality is, because of what has happened historically, from the moment from the moment Christopher Columbus landed on what he believed was a new land that he found, you know what I mean, even his perspective about the Native Americans, based on their skin color. And he views them and says, oh my goodness, they can be servants. Well, what made you think automatically, as a European man, as a white man, that these people, because they looked a little different than you, would make great servants? You know what I mean? And then you start seeing slavery take place, you know, even then. And then 1619 came. Then Europeans started robbing Black people from Africa. You know what I mean? Then the institution of slavery began in America. And then when the Constitution and stuff started being written, privilege was built into that system way back when. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it just happened to fall upon people of European descent, hence white people. And so it's not anybody's fault. But there are some people, unfortunately, who uses it to their advantage. And we've seen that on social media and all of that. So it's just ridiculous. So
And the all lives matter. I can't with it.
See,
It's all over my news feed. Friends of mine that are so passionate about all lives matter, and I'm like,
yeah, let's take about a minute.
Okay, let's talk about it.
I'll share the thought because I want people to hear this piece of it. And I said to you earlier, Black Lives Matter, right? Well, let me clarify. For one, we know that there is the movement or the organization or the group, right? Black Lives Matter. And I personally don't subscribe to that organization, but we subscribe to the sentiment. We subscribe to the message that, yes, Black Lives Matter. We know, we know that all lives matter. I know that all lives matter, right? But right now, the truth of the matter is my life doesn't matter as much to a lot of people. So we have to put more emphasis on the fact that Black Lives Matter. Now, here's my other concern, and I hate to be so skeptical, but this is what I'm wrestling with because this issue is so dense, right? You say Black Lives Matter, and I think and I'm not saying all people believe this, so I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. Hear my heart when I say this. Some people say Black Lives Matter. Great, keep saying Black Lives Matter, keep waving your flag, keep wearing your shirt. I just bought a shirt that says Black Lives Matter because I want to remind people. But I don't want that statement to only be in the context of an African-American man experiencing police brutality.
Right.
That's really how a lot of it started with Trayvon Martin. There was the hostility between a white man and a black man, and there was a death. Black Lives Matter. Okay. If Black Lives Matter, let's get back to what we were saying earlier in terms of the minor, everyday, subtle things that we experience. If my life matters, I don't want my life to only matter when I am being threatened by a white police officer who happens to be racist. I want my life to matter when I'm at work and I'm sharing my perspective. I want my life and my voice to matter when I'm frustrated about something and I articulate my feelings a different way because of my ethnical background and how I was raised and my values and my principles. I want my culture to matter when I want to talk about Black History Month and suggest that we put something in place to celebrate Black history, not only in February, but after that. You know what I mean? I want my life to matter as a Black man when I'm articulating my thoughts because I think differently, because there's a such thing as just ethnically, I'm conditioned differently because I'm Black, and there are certain things that I've experienced because I'm Black. I want all of me to matter, not just in certain scenarios. So I appreciate the sentiment. I appreciate everybody speaking up and saying it, but I'm really hoping and praying that people really understand that we need to have a holistic approach to that statement. If Black Lives Matter, that means everything about me 100% should matter. Not that it's better, not that it should supersede anybody else's thoughts, feelings, or I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that that it should have precedence. But when it is being articulated, when you see the outer workings of who I am as a Black man, that needs to matter when I'm in the grocery store. That needs to matter when I'm in church, you know what I mean? Not just in the context of racism, because are we going to keep saying Black Lives Matter when all this stuff dies down? Are we going to continue to treat each other like Black lives? Are white people going to continue to treat Black people like their lives really matter just in general conversation and real relationships? You know what I mean? And so
Aundre, let me ask you, how does that make you feel when you see that, when you hear that response to Black Lives Matter, when you see someone saying that all lives matter? What does that tell you? Because to me, I'll tell you how I interpret it after you share.
Honestly, my answer is real short. I ignore it. when somebody has that kind of rebuttal, Like I told you, I've been engaged in so many different conversations, whether it's phone call, or Zoom, or if it's a Facebook Messenger or email or whatever. As I've been seeing a lot of those ignorant statements, I just ignore them.
But what does it tell you? What do you decide in your head when you hear that?
It's being dismissive.
That's what that to me, they're not listening to anything else.
You're not hearing what I'm saying.
It stops the conversation. It shuts down the conversation. And we're not going to get anywhere with that.
No, we're not.
And for like little things that I try to do is I encourage diversity. So if I see, I try to bring up that topic about hiring, hiring more Black people or non-white people in director and up positions, things like that. When I see it, I'll call it in a sensitive way. But I also feel like I try to know my place in all this.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be difficult to navigate. But I do think that all each of us can do is just take a look at ourselves right now, really try to assess where we may have some growing to do around race, and be willing to do the research. There's so many resources online, books that we can be reading, and really become informed and knowledgeable, so that we can show up and be the best humans that we can be for each other. And I look to you to call me on stuff if if I, and same with you for me. I would do the same for you, and guide me if I'm, But is that even like your place to, but as my friend, I would want you to.
Yeah, as your friend, yes, it is. Yeah, as your friend, most definitely. We should hold each other accountable. You hold me accountable. You know what I mean? I hold you accountable. And it's all out of love. You know what I mean? It's because, not that I want to highlight your fault. It's just, I want to point out the issue because I want to see you do better. And I don't want to see you make that same mistake. You know what I mean? So no, you are absolutely right in everything that you are saying. And once again, we can kind of end the conversation here, but I mean, you just naturally circled back to it. And I think that's because who you are. Like, just for when you said, even at work, how you pay attention to and how you do your part in making sure that even in the hiring process on your job, looking for non-whites, people of color, whatever, and you said diversity, like that, that's the empathy and the action. You know what I mean? And that's how we can make changes, and how, because of the role that you are in, you try to take initiative to make sure things like that are happening, and not just, and you said it, not in entry-level positions, you said like in higher positions. You know what I mean? And so you, like I said, you just went right back to it. Like, that's who you are. You don't want to just live in the first phase of this thing, which is important, which is empathy. And now it's like, okay, how can I take my empathy and make it tangible, or make it practical, where people can see and follow your example? So I just
thank you.
I tell you all the time, I'm just so grateful for you in the life that you lead and the example that you set. And I really appreciate you, taking the time to entertain my my shenanigans, my thoughts and everything like that. So yeah,
I appreciate your friendship, and anything that I can do, I'm going to be there for you. And once some of this